even 11:30 to 12 o'clock, the professional panel on interpreting and an international perspective. International because we have people, one of the students, professional interpreter, but also a student from UMass Boston translation program, and lives in Europe and works there. And our presenters today are Ines Fusco, and Loreto Ansaldo, who's a former student of Boston University and UMass Boston, and Sladjana, who, can we see Sladjana? Yes, she is. Okay, perfect. I'm going to say just quickly that they are professional interpreters, and they've been working for quite some time in different places. And I would like to ask them to introduce themselves, and we are going to have hear about interpreting, and perhaps a little bit of the connection with translation. Thank you.
Hi.
So, yeah, let's start with the Ines and Loreto and then Sladjana.
Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and introduce the others. Hi, thank you all so very much for joining us here today. My name is Ines Fusco, and I will be your moderator. Thank you, Alicia and Karine, for your awesome presentations in advance of mine. And Karine, I attended one of your classes, and understanding what to charge is and how to set your rate is just super, super helpful. Thank you for that presentation. I'm going to ask all of you for your patience in advance before we start speaking for any background noises and the like. Diego, as Diego introduced us, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit about our panel discussion, and then I will give you a little bit about the three of us, and we'll go ahead and get started from there with Sladjana. Okay, so our panel, interpreting is a complex and process that requires a special set of skills and is different from translating, though it has some similarities. In this panel, we will hear firsthand advice on what it takes to be an interpreter, what this job looks like, and what skills you need to have or develop in order to be an interpreter. Our speakers will share their experiences from Europe. We have Sladjana, who is also a partner and student in this year's 2020 class at University of Boston, and got her MA in the European Business and Marketing from European University in Belgrade. Sladjana has worked as a professional translator and interpreter for more than 15 years and is fluent in English, Spanish, Slovenian, and Slovenian language, as well as her native Serbian. After graduating from the Faculty of Philology in Belgrade, Serbia, she started working as a freelance translator for numerous clients in Belgrade. In 2015, she started her own company, PNF Translations. She started working as a consecutive and simultaneous interpreter on some of the biggest European Union twinning project and others in Serbia and SEE Europe, covering different topics such as judiciary reform, the environment, trade, customs procedures, industrial policies, and non-performing loans. Loreto Ansaldo will also join us, and she graduated last year from the class, got her certificate, and she has her certificate in community legal and medical interpreting from Boston University and Masters of Science for teachers from Pace University, Joint Bachelor of Science in Nuclear Engineering and Latin American Studies from MIT. A native of Chile, Loreto has lived in Boston most of her life. The experience of being an immigrant has shaped how she moves through the world, and it's led to her work these last 4 years as a community interpreter and translator focused on local grassroots and community-based organizations. As a former math teacher, Loreto is also passionate about education and is part of a community-based participatory research project working with immigrant families to promote language, justice, and equity in schools. I myself am a graduate of Newbury College with my associates in applied business management. I am a native of the Dominican Republic. I am fluent in Spanish language and culture. I've served as a Spanish interpreter over the last 5 years, and my experience is in the areas of legal, judicial, medical, and everything else that's classified under community interpreting. I currently interpret for the Lawrence Public Schools. I'm a medical interpreter per diem at East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, and I work in the community as a freelance interpreter and translator. Working in Boston, Massachusetts as an immigrant receiving city has provided me the opportunity to broaden my cultural and colloquial experiences in a multitude of settings with a variety of dialects. So thank you again all for joining us. I'm going to turn the mic over to Slijana, who will start her presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here with us today. And thank you, Ines. I will now try to share my screen. Let's just see if it will work. Just a second. I don't know why it's not working. Okay, maybe I will need some help here. Ines, can you try?
All right, let me see, because it just went off my screen.
Let me see. Let me try. Does it work?
You are participating. I just tried to share and it says I can't share because you are sharing. So I can see you if you want to switch it to the movie screen, and then we'll see the entirety.
Yeah, let's see. But can you now see it?
Oh,
can you see it?
My computer. I can see it.
Okay, can you try now, please?
All right, let me see.
Okay. Okay, I see that it would.
Hold on.
Yep. Your desktop with all your apps. Okay.
Okay, great.
Are you seeing mine or yours?
Yeah, I see it now.
Okay.
Can you just go to the first
full
slide?
Go to presentation mode. Yay!
Yeah, okay. Great. Can you just go at the beginning of the presentations? Yeah, great.
Okay.
So yeah, you can go to the next slide. I will share with you how I see interpretation and what I've learned from my personal experience. First, I will tell you something about the similarities and differences between translation and interpretation. As you can see in the photo, as a translator, you can work from your home in your pajamas on your couch, while in interpretation, it's a little bit different and you are very much exposed. So you can't really function in this way. In the first photo, you can see Sharon Choi, who is maybe nowadays one of the celebrities interpreters. She's an interpreter for director of the movie Parasite, which is, by the way, a great movie. And as you can see, she's all the time by his side. She's very much exposed. Actually, she's as exposed as he is, as the speaker is, which is normal for consecutive interpretation. While for simultaneous interpretation, it's a little bit different because you have the privacy of a booth. Let's say that if everything goes well, you're not exposed. But if everything doesn't go well, you're very much exposed, and actually in a very bad way. As far as the similarities, for both things, you need proficiency in languages. You need to know translation techniques. So whether you change the word order or grammatical categories or you adapt or explain something, you're actually using the same techniques as in translation, but in a different way. In translation, you have time to choose, while in interpretation, it's more on an unconscious level. So I will tell you something about skills and character that you need in order to perform this job. First of all, you need to love languages, and you need to be proficient in 2 or more languages. You must not be afraid to be exposed, as I already mentioned. So if you have stage fright, this may be not a job for you, because most of the time interpreters are actually extroverted persons who love personal contact, and this is part of their character. And you also need to be able to handle stress, because as James Nolan said, the level of stress is the same as in flight control. Next slide, please. So let's see how you can start doing this job. We actually all started differently. We all have our story, our anecdotes, but what I would suggest is a formal training. This is a good start, but I would also suggest a formal training in translation, because in this way you get to learn all these techniques I told you about earlier. And of course, an interpretation training would prepare you and give you the feeling on how it's like to actually do this job. I would also suggest that you ask your colleagues for help, if it's possible, of course. If you have some more experienced colleagues, you can ask them to go with them to a conference and listen for a while. So that means that you, at the same time, you're listening to the floor and you're listening to the interpretation, and maybe they can give you, they can also let you try for a while. You have to practice a lot. You have to be in training all the time. You also need to prepare. This is why I put this 3 times: prepare, prepare, prepare. This is one of the essential things for interpretation. For consecutive interpretation, you also need to work on your note-taking technique. I'll tell you later on more about that. And what I also think that you must possess, this is you have to trust yourself, you have to be brave, and you have to be professional. So when I say be professional, I think be there early, prepare, dress accordingly, and that's about it. Next slide, please. I will tell you something about the challenges that we all face in our job. First one, and maybe the most important one is how to get the materials for let's say for a conference. Most of the time you don't get them, or you don't get all the materials. The reason for this is that most of the speakers actually work on their presentations until the last moment. So they usually finish their presentations the day before the conference, or even the day of the conference. But what you actually need to convince them is that you don't need this final version of their presentation. What you need is a draft version. This is enough. You just need to see where they are going with their presentation. So if they change something at last moment, it doesn't really matter. But so ask for the materials, not once, not twice, but like 10 times until you get them. Then I also would advise to bring your own water or fruits or chocolate or whatever. Because even though in a conference you should be, the lunch breaks and coffee breaks should be included, and you should be part of this too, sometimes they forget to give you water, and you talk a lot, so the water is kind of essential. You have to have a water in a booth for simultaneous. Also, if you don't know something, this is one of the frequent questions: what if I don't know all the words? What if there's something that I don't know? I would say that you need to ask. I already said that if you're a professional, you will get at the conference, or at the meeting early. So you can go through the presentation together with the speaker, or you can ask things that you're not sure about. Maybe you're not sure how what they meant with something, or how you need to explain something. So you can discuss all of that beforehand. And during consecutive interpretation, maybe it's not really popular to ask, but sometimes it's better to ask than to do a bad job. For example, you can ask, can you please explain this? I'm not sure what you meant with that. And, you know, just save the day with this. And also, I think that you need to find reliable colleagues because this is a job that you have to work in a team, and it's really important to have somebody that you can lean on, that somebody that who will help you, who is also responsible. So it's you know, this makes your life easier. What to expect from interpretation? Well, first of all, it's a well-paid job. It's also very exciting, and you get to learn a lot of different things about different topics. You also get to work in different working settings, like sometimes you will work in at some conferences in premises built for conferences. Sometimes you will work in a hotel, sometimes you will work at a meeting, or even in field. So it can be, I mean, it's pretty dynamic. You can also expect to travel. And finally, you can expect to feel exhausted at the end of the day, because, and you will only want to be, you know, in silence. Because it's really tiring, and your concentration has to be at a very high level all the time. Let's say something about how to practice. Well, since I'm in Europe, I chose this website. There is speech repository on the website of European Commission. They actually divided different speeches according to different levels. So you have basics, beginner, intermediate, advanced. So this means that all these videos or all these speeches are different. There are different topics, and the speed of the speech is also different. So you can choose accordingly. As I already mentioned, note-taking techniques. A technique is something that you have to work on. There are a lot of books and a lot of videos that you can use for this. I mean, you can just go and research on YouTube. I think there are some videos. You just, you know, type in note-taking techniques. And this is really helpful for consecutive interpretation. It's actually essential, but there is no such thing as a, you know, some technique that everybody uses. You have to really work on your technique. I would also suggest you to read a lot, just, you know, you know, stay in, like, to be in contact, in constant contact with the language. Also make a glossary, especially for topics that you work on frequently, or the clients that you work with frequently, because this will help you a lot for next meetings. You just go quickly over the glossary, and you know what they want from you. And these days, especially during this pandemic, a new, well, not actually a new thing, but actually a growing field in interpretation is remote interpretation. So I would suggest to get a good headset and a stable internet connection. And that's about it. So if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Snježana. That was awesome. Next, we'll hear from Loreto Ansaldo. And then after Loreto, we'll take some questions. Thank you again for your patience. I'm going to try uploading Loreto's presentation and see if I can look at, we have quite a few questions on chat. Oh.
Thank you so much, Ines.
You're welcome.
And thank you for having me today, and Svetlana and Professor Mancilla for inviting me. My name is Loreto Ansaldo. I came from Chile when I was 9 years old. I learned English in the Boston Public Schools. After undergrad, I moved to New York, where I worked as a middle school math teacher and was able to get my master's. Fast forward many years, in 2016, I took a certificate workshop called Interpreting for Social Justice, which was developed at the Highlander Research and Education Center, and completely fell in love with the work of interpreting and how language can be used to promote and foster social justice. And I started interpreting for local organizations, grassroots efforts, mostly in the simultaneous mode at community events. Interpreting is my fourth career. And one thing I can say for sure is that we can bring skills from everything we've done before to this work. It is so vast. I echo the language skills. You know, we absolutely have to work on them. I came here when I was young, and so in some feelings and emotions I feel in my gut and in my heart in Spanish in a certain way that I don't in English, but yet other topics I feel much more comfortable speaking about and writing about in English. So I absolutely have to work on both of my languages all the time. I also echo the people skills. I worked in retail for many years, and I bring those customer service skills to interpretation work all the time because we're constantly meeting new people and sharing about what we do. Curiosity is huge in all of this, of course. We have to be curious to learn and be nerdy about topics. You might get sucked into research and you think it might not be useful for anything, but then it is, and it shows up in an interpretation assignment. Also, patience, it's a really important skill, both with other people. We're constantly explaining, right, what we do. So many people don't quite understand our work, and also patience with ourselves as we continue to improve. So that relates obviously to education. I'll echo that getting some sort of formal training I have found extremely important in both interpreting and translating. And also not only our education, but again, teaching others about what we do, community members and clients. Of course, both interpretation and translation strive to convey a message, and that's the core of the work, but we don't talk like we write. Like, I don't know if you've ever read a transcription of yourself speaking. I have. It's shocking sometimes. And so it's not the same, right, to convey a message orally or in written form. So that's why I came to UMass for my translation certificate. When people saw that I interpreted, they would often ask me to translate. And I took on some assignments. Some of them were, I thought, you know, they were okay. They were easy or easier, but others were really difficult. And then I started translating for Boston Public Schools, and I quickly learned that I needed more training and education. Translators need amazing reading skills to comprehend what our source material is, and impeccable writing skills to then write it in a way that makes sense to the reader in the target language. I have found that sometimes doing a transcription of a site translation of a source material can be really helpful as a starting point, but then you need the skills to edit and clarify your writing. And sometimes our interpretation gets recorded for dissemination, like webinars or speeches. They end up on YouTube or Facebook. And that can feel a little bit like a translation, like it's more permanent. So as an interpreter, I ask myself, am I ready for my interpretation to be out there forever on the internet? So that can be another similarity, listening to our recordings of ourselves interpreting or read old translations so that we can improve. So the types of projects that I currently do, I still mostly interpret community events in the simultaneous mode. Like Svetlana said, our work is now really all virtual for the most part. I do some consecutive interpreting, and going to BU really helped with my note-taking skills. I'll put in the chat this book that I'm working through right now for consecutive note-taking. And also, like she said, YouTube videos. There are tons of exercises and examples that have been really helpful. The topics that I encounter are often of a global nature, so staying informed of global news and what's happening is always really helpful. And in addition to that, I co-facilitate a couple of youth interpreting programs that focus on social justice. I've translated copy for websites and Facebook events and brochures, surveys. I'm also currently involved with a multilingual and intergenerational storytelling project with community interpreters from high school students all the way to my generation. And that will hopefully be out at the end of the year. And last, I'm part of a community advisory team working with advocates, mothers, researchers to speak with parents whose children are in public schools here in Massachusetts, so that we can learn more about and support access and language justice in schools. And I'll end with preparation. So many of the similar things that have already been shared. I'll add definitely having conversations with your clients as early as you can, because like Svetlana said, we often don't get materials in advance. Touching base with your partner is really important, having that good relationship. And do a tech run. If you're doing virtual interpreting, absolutely make sure you set aside time the day before or even earlier. And I'll end on self-care and voice care. It's so important that, you know, work is stressful, we strain our voices, that we have systems in place to take care of ourselves throughout and also before, during, and after assignments. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Loreto and Svetlana. It's so true what you're saying about being prepared. I myself have been to, especially when working with agencies, right? Because when you get started, when I first started, I signed up with one agency and then realized that I wasn't getting enough work, wasn't making enough money. I added a telephone agency service. And then sooner or later, I got to 5 agencies. And those agencies don't always prepare you for what you need. You have to step up to the plate and make sure that you're prepared. You get your client number, your client information, call your client, ask them, what is this meeting about? I've been in situations where I've interpreted for at the district attorney's office on an asbestos case. I know nothing about asbestos. Called the client, gave me the information that I needed. I was able to get onto a website with all the simple identification of vocabulary and how to remove asbestos from a building, which was all going to be part of the discussion. I know we have a couple of questions, but I do want to ask the 2 ladies online, because this is one of my favorite questions. I believe that as interpreters, we have superpowers. Svetlana and I were talking about this the other day. I've been in a situation where I went to interpret for the parole review board, and I interpreted for the deceased family. And for 2 hours and 45 minutes by myself, I managed that entire meeting, everything that needed to be interpreted. And I came out of there feeling like Wonder Woman. It was just so exciting and so nice to really be able to help that family, to be able to listen to everything. So like Loreto says, going out there and making sure that that we provide a service for our community is really important. So Svetlana, what is your superpower experience?
Yeah, well, I completely understand you. My superpower experience is I've worked on a trilingual project in Belgrade. It was English, Spanish, and Serbian. And we had a meeting. It was a consecutive interpretation. And we had a meeting. The topic was budget for courts and some big institutions. So it was really technical, financial stuff. And the formal language of the project was English, but as soon as the clients sensed that that they could speak Spanish, they started speaking Spanish. So at the same time for about 2 hours, I was speaking English, Spanish, and Serbian, and we were talking about budget and some financial reports. And I didn't really have time to think about that, so it was like I was just doing it. And at the end of the meeting, the Serbian part stood up, and they shook hands with me, and they said, we never saw this. And I got out of the building, like I felt like I had wings. So I really felt like I had superpowers.
It's the best feeling.
Yeah.
How about you, Loreto? What are your superpower experiences?
I think the first time I felt really powerful as an interpreter was when I was part of a team interpreting a community event in 5 different languages. And we managed relay. We had to collect equipment from 4 different organizations. It was exhilarating and, like you all said, exhausting. But to see people communicating across languages and cultures was incredibly powerful. So I saw a glimpse of what's possible.
Excellent, excellent. So we have some questions here if you could post them on the Q&A, that way we can follow through. I see one question here from Anonymous. I have been an interpreter for about 30 years with practically no training. With this pandemic, I've had the chance to watch many trainings about interpreting. It is hard to teach new tricks to an old dog. There is so much to learn. It is overwhelming. How do you manage your learning? I'm going to put this up out to one of you ladies.
Ines, maybe you would like to, to take this one. Yeah,
I'll take this one. I manage my learning every little chance that I get. I am trying to learn. The more that you go out there and you put yourself out there to interpret, the more you learn. It's a lot of by doing. And then there are certain websites that you can go on to do some practicing. For example, The Interpreter's Gym by Steve Sanford, I believe his name is. He'll give you different scenarios, and you can get online, listen to them, interpret them yourself. But you do actually need to find that time, read, interpret. And I watch, my strong language is English, and even though I'm a native Spanish speaker, I will watch Spanish television, the Spanish news, and then I will repeat the news in Spanish, what they're saying in Spanish, to help my vocabulary and my pronunciation. All right. The next question is for Ines. I was asked to interpret in a deposition case related to, oh, that's what I said. Oh, it's recording me. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. Can you share a bit more about using emotion in your interpretation? I'm sorry. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This was not correct.
Yes, that was a question.
Okay. I was asked to interpret in a deposition case related to asbestos, and the agency lawyer dragged their feet about sharing materials so I could study in advance. They did so in a rush when I wrote to say 2 days before that they should look for someone else. I received about 40 pages of documentation. I feel your pain. So try to get an advance jump on that. And just keep bugging. If I have some simultaneous work that I get called upon by an agency, I call the agency before I take the job. I let them know, listen, I'm going to need all this in advance so that I can do the best job for you. I want to make sure that you look great. And by the same token, I want to look great. I don't want to mess up. Some agencies will give you the client information, some don't, and I just keep calling the client. And the client feels your pain because they want you to do the best job that you can. And let's see, Does somebody want to take this?
I will take this one about emotions. Well, I would like to say that, yes, actually, interpretation is more than just words. You have to, in a way, imitate the tone of the speaker as well. So you just, I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like acting. You just, get into the role. But this is actually connected with the working standards for interpretation, because you should actually require a direct view of the speaker and the room, and therefore you shouldn't agree to working from screen except in some exceptional circumstances, because it's easier to, when you watch a speaker, when you watch what's going on, when you see a speaker, when you see the gestures that he or she uses, it's a lot easier for you to get into this tone of the interpretation. So yes, I mean, it's really important to also transmit the tone.
Excellent. Okay, and thank you very much for an anonymous. Somebody reminded me that was my comment. That was so silly. For a beginner interpreter, what would you advise to start working in the field without prior experience?
I have a bit of advice there. If you can, if it's oftentimes it's not, but if it's possible, shadowing an interpreter. Right now, with so many events going virtual, find out the ones that are being interpreted and take a look and take a listen. I think that can be really helpful. Practice sessions can, buddying up with people and practicing can introduce you to fellow interpreters. And then once we build trust with our colleagues, if we are asked to do an assignment and we cannot for some reason, and we have already someone that we trust, we're way more likely to recommend that person. So I think building those relationships of trust, looking towards the future.
The next question we have, and how are we doing for time? I think we're a little over.
I will still have 2 minutes, Ines.
Okay,
So
awesome.
that's fine. Take your time. Thank you.
All right. These are strange days for healthcare interpreters. They certainly are. I feel we are wearing many hats, advocacy being a big one. Never felt a greater sense of responsibility towards my patients and community. 100% agreed. When this all started and I was working at the clinic in the emergency department, and patients were starting to come in and there weren't enough masks to go around. And when you live and breathe that, and the first thing you do is you cover the patient's mask, right? Because you're like, well, if she's gonna sneeze, I don't want it on me. So let's start with the patient. But absolutely, agreed. How do you reach different vernacular or slang from Latin American countries? How do you research those? In interpreting, you ask because we're standing there live, right? So you just ask if you don't understand, and then you add that to your vocabulary list. Here in Boston, and Loreto can attest to, I'm sorry, Loreto can attest to this. We have such a huge community, diverse Latinos in this area, that we are afforded a great opportunity to learn all those dialects. And my favorite is the ahora, ahorita, and understanding the differences. If you're talking to somebody from one country, ahora could mean today, now, or later. Whereas ahorita as well could mean later, now, this minute. So really you ask, Loreto, you have something to add?
Yeah, I follow people on Twitter from different countries, and that really helps. I find myself looking up new words every day just by following different Twitter accounts.
And how about you, Sljana, out in Europe?
Well, I don't really interpret from Spanish or from English into Spanish or vice versa. I interpret other combinations, but yeah, this could be, Spanish is a really tricky one, I have to say. And in interpretation, you just have to improvise. You have to think quickly. So you just have to find a way.
This is one of the reasons why this is a stressful profession, but it's also really interesting. You have to improvise a lot.
Yes. Awesome. I think that was the last of the questions that we had in the Q&A. I see one little question that I'll answer at the bottom because it relates. How do you deal with clients who don't recognize the word in the target language, but only know the word in English, even though they are the LEP? Then if they look at you quizzically, like they didn't understand what you said, or then you have to ask. And you have to keep an eye when you're interpreting, especially in the healthcare world. Keep an eye on the person you're interpreting for and look at their body language, and that will give you a sense of whether they understood or not. And if they didn't understand a word, then you find a way, and that's another form of advocating. With that, I think this could conclude our presentation. What do you think?
We loved it.